You know, life has a way of placing people in front of us who awaken parts of our soul we didn't even know were waiting to be called forward. And for someone who carries an avoidant pattern, this awakening comes only through one rare, extraordinary connection. One person who can slip past the walls that were built from years of hurt, disappointment, and survival. Avoidants don't push people away because they don't care. They push away because they care so deeply, so intensely that it frightens them. Their armor isn't rejection, it's self-protection. But here's the truth, even someone who's learned to shut the world out is still wired for connection. They still hunger for intimacy. They still long to feel seen. And then, one day, if life is generous, someone comes along who resonates at the frequency of their soul, someone steady, someone patient, someone whose energy doesn't demand but invites. That person becomes the exception, the breakthrough, the one safe place in a world that has felt unsafe for so long. And once an avoidant bonds with that rare person, the connection becomes almost sacred. It's not casual. It's not replaceable. It's not temporary. It becomes a lifelong imprint because it wasn't made through pressure. It was made through trust, through time, through silent moments where their heart finally whispered, "Here, I can breathe here." But listen closely. This is not about waiting for someone to unlock you. This is about becoming the version of yourself who can recognize and receive love without running from it. Because the deepest transformation doesn't happen when someone else earns your vulnerability. It happens when you decide you're worthy of real connection. If you've ever loved an avoidant, understand this: you are not fighting them. You are fighting the ghost that taught them love was dangerous. Your patience, your boundaries, your authenticity, these are the keys that create safety. Not pressure, not chasing, just presence. And if you are the avoidant, hear me. Life is not asking you to be unbreakable. Life is asking you to be real, to risk letting one person in, to allow yourself the gift of connection without surrendering your independence. You don't have to dismantle the entire wall, just open a single door. One door for the person who's earned it. One door for the soul who sees you, not your defenses. Because when that rare bond appears, it's not just another relationship. It is destiny calling you into a higher version of yourself, into the love your spirit has been starving for. Let this be your reminder. You are not meant to walk through this world untouched, unseen, unknown. You are meant for connection. You are meant for depth. You are meant for that one extraordinary bond that awakens the courage to love fully, freely, and fearlessly. And once you open to that, your entire life changes. Avoidants do connect, just not with many. People often misunderstand avoidant individuals, assuming their distance means they're cold, detached, or incapable of meaningful relationships. But the truth is far more nuanced and deeply human. Avoidants feel connection just as strongly, sometimes even more intensely, than others. What separates them isn't a lack of emotional capacity. It's their heightened sensitivity to emotional risk. Growing up or moving through life, they learn that closeness can be unpredictable, overwhelming, or unsafe. This taught them to regulate their emotional world by limiting access to it. Instead of leaning in, they lean back. Instead of opening up, they close the door gently and quietly, hoping no one notices the longing on the other side of it. Their instincts for distance are protective mechanisms, not indicators of apathy. They're not avoiding people. They're avoiding the emotional chaos or pain they fear connection will bring. This is why avoidants don't bond with many people. For them, connection is not casual. It's never impulsive. It's never entered into lightly. Every step toward intimacy demands enormous emotional energy. Every act of vulnerability feels like a risk with potentially devastating consequences. While others can form multiple deep relationships, avoidants conserve their emotional bandwidth. Their trust is not distributed, it is invested. An investment for them is slow, deliberate, and cautious. When an avoidant person meets someone new, they don't immediately evaluate compatibility or chemistry. They scan for emotional safety, consistency, predictability, and genuine intentions. They're watching, quietly, whether the other person is emotionally overwhelming or emotionally grounded. They're observing whether this person respects boundaries or pushes past them. They're noticing if the person seeks drama or peace. These criteria are not superficial. They are survival filters created by past experiences where closeness equaled pain, control, or instability. Because of these filters, bonding becomes rare. Only a very small number of people will ever feel aligned enough, grounded enough, and stable enough to pass through the avoidance internal barriers. And when they do, something extraordinary happens. The avoidant experiences connection not as something threatening, but as something soothing, safe, familiar in a way they didn't realize they were longing for. The rarity of this bond is not just because avoidants are selective, it's because the connection they seek is deeply authentic. They're not interested in surface-level attachment. They crave a deeper resonance, a sense that the other person understands them without pressure, without needing to fix them, without expecting emotional demonstrations that feel unnatural or forced. They want to be accepted for who they are, not who someone demands them to be. That kind of acceptance opens doors they thought they had permanently locked. Once they sense that safety, the avoidant begins to show sides of themselves most people never see. They reveal their humor, their softness, their devotion, their loyalty. They show affection in subtle but meaningful ways. They become surprisingly attentive, gentle, and deeply committed. But they only do this with the one person who has proven themselves to be emotionally steady and respectful of their space. Their rare bond is not an accident. It's a reflection of their internal wiring. They don't distribute their deepest emotional energy across many relationships. They reserve it for someone who feels like home, someone who brings peace instead of pressure, someone whose presence doesn't demand performance but invites authenticity, someone who allows them to feel seen without being exposed, understood without being analyzed, loved without being consumed. In this way, avoidance teaches something profound about connection. Depth doesn't come from how many people you bond with, but how deeply you bond with the right one. Their lifelong bond is built on trust, not intensity. Many people confuse emotional closeness with emotional intensity, thinking that passion, urgency, or dramatic emotional expression is what creates deep connection. But for someone with avoidant tendencies, intensity feels more like danger than love. They don't open up because someone overwhelms them with attention or desire. They open up because someone shows up consistently, calmly, and reliably over time. Trust for them is the foundation of connection, not emotional fireworks. Avoidants often grow up in environments where emotions felt unpredictable, where love came with conditions, or where vulnerability was punished rather than nurtured. These early experiences teach them to associate intensity with instability. When someone comes in too fast, too passionately, or too demanding of emotional closeness, the avoidant instinctively withdraws, not because they don't care, but because their nervous system registers intensity as a threat. Their entire emotional strategy is shaped around avoiding that threat, and intensity, regardless of intention, can feel like a storm ready to tear down the walls they built to protect themselves. This is why trust becomes the core of how they bond. Trust, for an avoidant, means safety. It means they don't have to perform. It means they won't be judged for needing space or silence. It means the other person won't take their independence personally or try to force intimacy before they're ready. Trust for them is the slow accumulation of moments where the other person proves again and again that they are solid, grounded, and emotionally steady. Intensity is flashy, but trust is transformative. Avoidants watch for signs of emotional regulation in others. They are drawn to people who can handle their own emotions without making the avoidant responsible for them. Someone who can communicate clearly, respect boundaries, and stay calm during conflict becomes a safe harbor. This person becomes the rare individual who can enter their inner world. Avoidants don't trust quickly, but when they do, the connection is profound. This trust is built not through declarations of love, but through consistency, through someone showing up when they say they will, through someone who listens more than they push, through gentle conversations that allow the avoidant to reveal parts of themselves without feeling rushed or exposed, through the other person giving space when needed but not disappearing, through emotional steadiness that communicates, "I'm here and you don't have to be afraid." Intensity seeks immediate closeness, but trust allows gradual, sustainable closeness. Avoidants also bond through predictability. They thrive when the emotional environment around them is calm and transparent. They open up when they see that the other person doesn't fluctuate wildly, doesn't manipulate through affection or withdrawal, and doesn't expect emotional theatrics to prove love. When someone's presence feels like a steady hum rather than a crashing wave, the avoidant begins to relax, their defenses lower, their heart softens, and slowly they allow this person into the inner sanctuary they keep closed to almost everyone. Once trust is established, the bond becomes almost unbreakable, because the avoidant has invested something incredibly precious, their vulnerability. When they trust someone enough to let them in, They're not just sharing a moment, they're sharing parts of themselves they never show the world. This level of openness is so rare for them that once it's given, it creates a lifelong imprint. What makes this bond special is that it's built on deliberate choices, not emotional impulse. It doesn't burn hot and fade quickly. It deepens over time, becoming more resilient, more intimate, and more enduring. Avoidants may not be expressive in traditional ways, but their commitment is powerful. When they choose you, they choose with their whole heart, quietly, profoundly, and with a loyalty that lasts a lifetime. Intensity may light the match, but for an avoidant, trust is what keeps the flame alive. They crave connection but fear vulnerability. This paradox sits at the heart of the avoidant inner world, a silent conflict that shapes how they relate to others and how they protect themselves from emotional overwhelm. On one hand, avoidants deeply desire closeness, intimacy, and companionship. Their longing to be understood, held, and emotionally known is every bit as strong as anyone else's, sometimes stronger. But on the other hand, the very experience they crave is tied to their deepest fears. Vulnerability to them feels like stepping onto unstable ground. It feels like opening a door that, once unlatched, might never shut again. And so they hover on the edges of connection, wanting but fearing, reaching but pulling back, loving but guarding. Avoidants learned early in life that vulnerability came with a cost. Maybe they were shamed for their feelings, maybe emotional needs went unmet or were met inconsistently. Maybe closeness was tied to chaos, pressure, or emotional responsibility far beyond their capacity. Over time, these experiences taught them that opening up equals losing control, and losing control equals getting hurt. So they internalized a survival strategy: stay self-sufficient, stay composed, stay guarded. And yet, no matter how strong that armor becomes, the human heart still longs for connection. This is the emotional tension they live with, wanting intimacy but fearing its consequences. When avoidants sense emotional closeness growing, their fear often rises uninvited, not because the connection is unhealthy, but because the experience of being seen, truly seen, activates old wounds. Vulnerability feels like exposure. It feels like too much at once. So they create distance. They retreat into independence. They focus on tasks, distractions, or personal goals to regulate the internal discomfort that intimacy triggers. This distancing isn't rejection, it's self-preservation. To them, space equals safety. Yet even as they pull back, a part of them aches for connection. They notice the absence. They feel the emotional gap, even if they rarely express it. Avoidants often form emotional attachments quietly, subtly, and deeply in their own private way. They may not show their longing externally, but internally it's present. Their fear doesn't erase their desire. It simply makes the path to closeness slower, more cautious, more measured. What avoidants need isn't someone to force vulnerability, but someone who can hold space for it. Someone who doesn't demand emotional expression, but invites it. Someone who listens without rushing, observes without judging, and remains calm when the avoidant retreats to regroup. These gestures of patience create the safety that allows them to approach vulnerability without feeling threatened. Avoidants also need reassurance that vulnerability won't lead to loss of autonomy. They fear that if they let someone in too deeply, they may be engulfed, emotionally consumed by the other person's needs or expectations. They worry that closeness will require them to sacrifice their independence, their boundaries, or their identity. This fear is not about avoiding love. It's about preserving themselves. When a partner demonstrates that emotional closeness and individuality can coexist, the avoidant begins to relax into connection. Over time, with the right person and the right conditions, avoidants can become remarkably open, trusting, and emotionally expressive. Their vulnerability doesn't come in grand gestures, but in small, meaningful shifts, sharing a personal story, asking for help, initiating affection, or revealing their internal thoughts. These moments are monumental because they represent emotional courage. Each step is a risk, and each risk is a declaration: I trust you not to hurt me. Their craving for connection, once met with safety, becomes a powerful force. The avoidant begins to understand that vulnerability is not weakness. It's relationship currency. It's the doorway to the intimacy they've secretly longed for. And as the internal conflict begins to heal, the fear softens, the walls lower, the heart opens. Avoidants don't fear love. They fear the pain that once accompanied it. But with patience, trust, and emotional steadiness, they learn that vulnerability isn't a threat. It's the path to the connection they've been seeking all along. When they choose someone, it's intentional and long-lasting. Avoidants are often misunderstood as detached, uninterested, or incapable of deep connection, but in reality, their emotional decisions are made with far more thoughtfulness and deliberation than most people realize. An avoidant does not fall into love impulsively or allow someone into their inner world casually. Every step closer to intimacy for them is weighed, considered, and measured. This is not because they lack emotion. It is because their emotions run deep, and allowing someone access to their heart is a profound commitment. Avoidants don't accidentally bond with anyone. They don't get swept up in chemistry or temporary attraction. They don't confuse intensity with intimacy or mistake attention for connection. Their hearts have been trained through experience to stay guarded. So when they choose someone, it is because they have observed, evaluated, and quietly tested the emotional landscape. They are looking for signs that the person is safe, steady, and consistent. They're watching whether the connection feels peaceful rather than overwhelming, whether the person respects boundaries rather than invading them, whether they communicate with clarity rather than chaos. Because avoidants process connection through this slow internal evaluation, the person they ultimately choose is someone who has passed through many layers of emotional filtration. That choice is not random. It's selective at the deepest level. This is what makes their bond so powerful. When an avoidant commits, they're not just choosing a relationship, they're choosing a person who has demonstrated real emotional compatibility, someone who aligns with their needs for space, independence, trust, and predictability. This intentionality also gives their relationships a unique durability. Many people pair from a place of loneliness, attraction, or convenience. But avoidants pair from a place of trust and emotional safety. They have no interest in temporary connections because temporary connections feel like unnecessary emotional risk. If they are going to open their heart, really open it, they want to know it's for someone who will be there long term. Their investment is slow to start, but once it begins, it is deep and enduring. Their long-lasting bond is rooted in loyalty. An avoidant who chooses someone does not do so halfway. They may not express their emotions in the most visible or traditional ways, but their commitment often shows up in quiet consistency. They listen deeply. They remember small details. They show up when it matters. They make practical sacrifices. They support their partner's independence because they understand the value of their own. Their love is not loud, but it is steady. It is not impulsive, but it is unwavering. Because avoidants rarely choose more than one deep, lifelong connection, the person they bond with becomes irreplaceable in their emotional world. It's not that they can't love again, it's that they don't want to reopen the emotional vulnerability that forming such a bond requires. They know what it costs them internally to let someone in that far, and they do not give that level of access lightly. The chosen bond becomes a cornerstone of their emotional life, something they cherish, even if they struggle to express it. This is also why an avoidance love can feel so profound once it is established. Their partner becomes the exception to every rule they have around love and closeness. The walls that usually protect them become doors. The distance that once kept them safe becomes unnecessary. The mistrust that was a survival mechanism begins to dissolve, and in its place grows a quiet devotion, one that is not flashy or dramatic, but deeply sincere. Their intentional choice also reflects a deeper emotional truth. Avoidants do not fear commitment itself. They fear committing to the wrong person. But when they find the right one, commitment becomes a source of stability rather than stress. Their loyalty becomes a gift, a rare and enduring bond, formed not from impulse but from clarity, trust, and emotional integrity. When they choose someone, they're choosing with their whole being, carefully, consciously, and with a depth that can last a lifetime. Their rare bond transforms them. For someone with avoidant tendencies, love is not just an emotional experience, it is a catalyst, a mirror, and a doorway into parts of themselves they've kept hidden for years. Avoidants spend much of their lives believing that independence is the only safe way to move through the world. They train themselves to survive without leaning on anyone, to navigate life without exposing their vulnerabilities, to maintain emotional control at all costs. But when they meet the rare person who feels safe enough, steady enough, and attuned enough to earn their trust, everything begins to shift. This bond does more than comfort them. It transforms them. The transformation begins subtly. An avoidant who once kept conversations surface level suddenly starts sharing pieces of their inner life. They reveal small stories from their past, express their fears in quiet whispers, or allow someone to witness them in moments of emotional tenderness. These might seem like small steps to others, but for the avoidant, they are profound acts of courage. Each moment of openness signals that the person they've bonded with has created an emotional environment where vulnerability no longer feels threatening. This kind of bond softens their internal defenses. The walls they spent years building weren't constructed out of apathy. They were built from past wounds, disappointments, and emotional instability. But when the right person enters their life and interacts with them with patience, consistency, and calmness, those walls become unnecessary. The avoidant begins to see that connection doesn't have to mean chaos or loss of control. They learn that sharing themselves doesn't equate to losing themselves. Slowly, they begin to experience intimacy not as a risk, but as a refuge. This is where the transformation deepens. The avoidance worldview shifts. They begin to see relationships in a new light, no longer as something to endure or avoid, but as something to cherish. The bond helps them realize that two people can be close without smothering each other. They discover that independence and intimacy can coexist. This realization rewires their emotional nervous system. Instead of bracing themselves for loss, engulfment, or conflict, they start to anticipate comfort, understanding, and support. The right partner also activates parts of the avoidant's emotional capacity that have been dormant. Avoidants are often incredibly loyal, deeply empathetic, and profoundly loving, but those qualities stay hidden until they feel completely safe in the presence of their rare person. The avoidant becomes more affectionate, more attentive, and more emotionally available than most people ever expected. They begin expressing love in their own unique ways, through acts of service, thoughtful gestures, deep listening, or simply being present. Their partner becomes the sole recipient of a depth of love that they rarely show to anyone else. This bond also inspires growth. Avoidants begin to develop stronger communication skills because they want the relationship to thrive. They become more self-aware because they care deeply about how their patterns affect the person they love. They might even confront old wounds or fears they once preferred to ignore, not because they're forced to, but because they feel supported enough to finally face them. The relationship becomes a safe place for healing, and the avoidant steps into a version of themselves that is fuller, braver, and more open than they've ever been. What's most powerful about this transformation is that it is driven by trust, not pressure. The rare person doesn't change the avoidant by demanding closeness. They change them by offering stability. They don't force emotional expression. They create an environment where expression feels natural. They don't push the avoidant to become vulnerable. They simply become someone the avoidant wants to be vulnerable with. In this way, the avoidant's rare bond becomes a turning point in their life. It changes how they love, how they relate, how they heal, and how they see themselves. The transformation is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet, steady, and deeply profound. An evolution born from the simple truth that the right connection doesn't just touch the heart. It transforms it. This bond requires patience and emotional intelligence. For an avoidant, connection is not a fast-moving river. It is a gradual unfolding, a slow thawing of emotional ice formed over years of self-protection. To build a meaningful bond with them, patience isn't optional. It is essential. Their internal world is wired for caution, for careful observation, for slow trust building. They are not withholding love out of ego or indifference. They are moving at the pace required for their nervous system to feel safe. And the person who becomes their rare lifelong bond is someone who intuitively understands this, someone who recognizes that emotional depth can be nurtured but never forced. Patience plays a crucial role because avoidants often test the emotional environment without even realizing they're doing it. They might pull back after a moment of closeness, not because they want distance permanently, but because they need to regulate the intensity of connection. For the average person, this push and pull can feel confusing or frustrating. But someone with emotional intelligence sees these moments for what they are, signs of internal overwhelm, not rejection. They respond not with pressure, fear, or insecurity, but with calmness and understanding. This kind of patience isn't passive, it's active, aware, and emotionally attuned. It means recognizing that the avoidant needs time to process their feelings. It means giving them space without disconnecting. It means listening deeply, rather than taking everything personally. When the avoidant pulls back, the emotionally intelligent partner stays grounded, offering a stable presence instead of emotional chaos. This stability becomes the very thing that reassures the avoidant that closeness doesn't have to lead to loss of control. Emotional intelligence also plays a powerful role in communication. Avoidants generally respond best to calm, clear, non-reactive dialogue. They shut down when confronted with emotional intensity, raised voices, or accusations. But when someone communicates with empathy, expressing needs without blame and discussing issues without hostility, the avoidant feels safe enough to stay present. They feel respected, not cornered. They feel invited into connection, not forced into it. Over time, this encourages them to open up more, share more, and engage more deeply. Another part of emotional intelligence is understanding boundaries, both respecting the avoidance and having healthy ones of your own. An emotionally intelligent partner doesn't interpret the avoidance need for space as abandonment, nor do they allow the avoidance distance to override their own emotional needs. Instead, they communicate boundaries clearly. I care about you and I'm here. I'm also someone who needs conversation and connection. Let's find a rhythm that works for both of us. This balanced approach helps the relationship remain healthy and reciprocal, rather than one-sided or strained. Patience and emotional intelligence also create an environment where the avoidant feels free to take risks, the emotional kind. When they sense that their partner won't judge their hesitations or anxieties, they begin pushing their own comfort zones. They take initiative in communication. They express affection more openly. They show vulnerability without feeling exposed or criticized. This is a monumental shift for them, and it's only possible because the emotional atmosphere feels safe enough to risk closeness. This bond requires understanding the avoidance triggers as well. Emotional intelligence means noticing patterns, when they withdraw, what overwhelms them, what helps them re-engage. It means responding with compassion instead of reactivity. Instead of asking, "Why are you distant?" the emotionally intelligent partner might ask, "Is something feeling too intense right now?" This invitation communicates safety, curiosity, and respect rather than pressure. Ultimately, the rare person who forms a lifelong bond with an avoidant is someone who doesn't fight their nature but supports their growth. They move slowly when needed, gently when necessary, and steadily always. They don't rush the connection, they nurture it. They don't demand vulnerability, they inspire it. They don't take distance personally, they meet it with grounded presence. Through patience and emotional intelligence, they create a relational space where the avoidant feels safe enough to bloom. And once that bloom begins, once the avoidant feels truly seen, understood, and accepted, the bond that forms becomes deep, loyal, and enduring in a way few connections ever reach. When you understand the heart of an avoidant, you realize their distance was never a lack of love. It was a shield forged from experiences that taught them to survive, not connect. But when that one rare person appears, the one who brings peace instead of pressure, presence instead of chaos, everything begins to change. Walls soften, fears quiet. The heart that once hid begins to open slowly but powerfully. And in that opening lies a bond unlike anything else, intentional, loyal, transformative, and enduring. If you are that rare connection, honor the gift you've been entrusted with. If you are the avoidant, honor your courage, because letting someone in is one of the bravest acts of the human spirit, and no matter which side of the journey you're on, remember this. Real love doesn't rush you, overwhelm you, or break you. Real love strengthens you. Real love expands you. Real love frees you. Thank you for walking this path with me and allowing these words to speak into your life. Goodbye for now. May love, wisdom, and healing continue to guide every step you take.